Well, welcome to an interview with Hitman.
Thank you.
At RARALAnd.
Glad to be here. Yeah.
Are you all set up and ready to get started with the tournament?
Yeah, I literally just got set up a minute ago before I came up here.
Okay.
Having a little trouble setting up Worthy Champion, so I decided to play Cyberpunk instead. Having a lot of fun with that. I think people are getting a little weirded out by the fact that I'm sitting next to Happy and not playing practice games, but they'll come soon.
Yeah. Do you think that takes you a bit of the nerves off that you can play? It
does, yes. I think it does. Like, I don't need to practice, I'm already good enough. I can beat him.
Maybe Happy looks over and glances and sees you're not even practicing.
Yeah, he's probably intimidated. He's thinking, wow, this guy is that confident.
That must be it. Yeah. And that's one of the things that people are really looking forward to. That's you versus Happy. Mm-hmm. That's one of the matchups that people, mention over and over again.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I will practice in a few hours. Like I'm gonna grind out some games, make sure I'm ready for Happy, because I don't want to put forth a subpar effort, especially when I haven't played Happy and people want to see this match. I'm definitely gonna make sure I'm prepared. Yeah.
And the approach as an orc against Undead or like Happy, take that as an example. I feel like we see a lot of different attempts. We see Envy being very hit and run and evasive against him.
Yeah.
Then there's players like Focus who like to go hit and strong and take him on in a fight. What do you think is the correct approach, or do you think it's just a matter of preference what people play?
I think it's actually very important to have a wide variety of builds that you can play really, really well. So like you see Envy playing Wyverns. I think everyone should be able to play Wyverns as well as Envy and just have that build in their arsenal, and they need to be able to play Farseer Headhunters like Focus, and they need to be able to play Blade as well, because there's certain things you can do, like if you're opening Farseer Headhunters, they want to play Ghouls, so if if you can force them into certain builds, if you make them Expo and make them play Ghouls or make them play Fiends, you can kind of throw them off with your build selection by like showing your hand and then switching it up. So I think it's important to have variety, but at the same time, it's hard to play every strat that well, which is why orcs just need to step it up. Like Happy's playing better than all the orcs, and that's why he's winning. So it's the onus right now is on the orcs to play better, I believe. I don't think it's imbalanced at all. I think it's simply hard, and orcs aren't used to that, and work needs to be done.
Yeah. I do think that differentiating between a hard matchup and an imbalanced matchup is both hard, but it's also two different things. What are your opinions on
Yeah, it is. I think it's very important to make a distinction between those things, because sometimes you can play a matchup and it feels very difficult, but that's just because at the level that you're playing at, a lot of the things that are necessary are difficult to pull off. Like, just doing basics can be very difficult in certain matchups, but once you reach a certain level, you realize that the balance is actually pretty good, and it was just the difficulty of executing it, which was the problem. Of course, at the higher level, it's hard. When you're so good at the game, you're very egotistical, and you want to think that you know everything about the game. So if you think something's hard to play, you start to believe that it's imbalanced as well. So it's a hard distinction to make, but it's definitely there, and it's different for every matchup. So I feel like it's not important to dwell on it. At the end of the day, all you have to do is play better, and blaming balance isn't gonna help. So
that's probably the right attitude to have when you want to compete.
Yeah.
Certainly. And speaking of competing, you are the type of player I see. Either you are grinding critical amounts of games each day, or you are playing Cyberpunk. Speaking of which, what is like? Do you feel like you lose motivation, or is this just something else that comes in? Takes over?
So I've played a lot of games just constantly since I've came back to the game in like 2019, I think. But ever since DreamHack Stockholm at the end of last year, I haven't been playing that much, and I haven't felt as motivated just because there hasn't been much competition since DreamHack pulled out. So there hasn't been many tournaments, many opportunities to play and stay in shape for. So I do admit that I haven't been as motivated as in the past, but it's not a significant thing where I'm just like gonna lose all my skill immediately. I'm still playing games, I'm still practicing, Like, you know, sometimes I'll play like 30 games a day, like I used to.
Exactly.
So I'm still in shape, so I'm gonna be ready for sure.
And with this being the first offline tournament in a year or so, have you been practicing for this specifically, or leading up to this? Have you been more, or?
Not really. No, I've just been playing my normal game. But the thing I've done is I've spent a little more time thinking about what I'm gonna do in these series. I don't think my practice has changed, but I think it's a mental thing that you have to make sure that you're mentally prepared for what your opponent's going to do and having the right builds laid out. Because I have the tools, I just need to think about which tools I'm going to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's switch up the question. I wanted to ask you, I actually intended this to be the icebreaker for this interview, but now we got into another part of the interview. That's fine. I want to ask you about your favorite silly strategy for when you're just playing ladder, or don't have to try hard.
Oh man,
do you have any of those?
I hardly don't try hard, but if I'm just cheesing or something, man, just play Night Elf.
Just play Night Elf.
It's so easy, so fun. It's the whole race is a cheese. Yeah. I mean, just roll your face across the keyboard, and it's probably a legitimate top tier strategy.
Yeah, that's a take. Okay, and. Then if you look at your group on the tournament, let's start with the group. How do you feel about the group?
It's an exciting group, that's for sure. Foggy, Xlord, and Happy. I mean, I couldn't be more excited. I get to prove that NA is better than EU all in one go. Are you kidding me?
No pressure.
Let's serve them up on a silver platter for me. Amazing. I'm so happy.
No pressure on your shoulder, but I think everyone in America will be looking.
I don't feel pressure at all. Like, I'm just happy to play these guys. Like, I'm excited to play Happy because I haven't actually played him at a LAN. Foggy I've played before, but he's always beaten me in the bigger tournaments, and I've beaten him in like smaller online cups. We're usually pretty 50-50, but he's gotten the bigger tournament wins. So it'd be nice to like turn that one around. And then Xlord, I did beat him at DreamHack Stockholm, but I'm sure he wants to get that one back. So all these guys, like, I'm sure they want to win.
I feel like
so I do too.
Be a player with a crush against like wanting to win.
Yeah.
Controversial player like you.
To be fair, I never rubbed it in his face, but I'm sure a lot of people who enjoy the EU NA beef like took that one to heart. That win to heart. So yeah, I want to keep that streak going.
Yeah, and I feel it's safe to say, and sorry if you disagree, but both you and Xlord are seen as rather cocky online personalities.
Yeah.
So when they can stir up drama between you, then they all for it.
Yeah. We can be brash and a little outspoken if we want to be, but yeah.
And how do you see, now you have two undeads in your group, you have Xlord and you have Happy. How do you see the differences in their play style, or how you'd approach them when you play against them?
Good question. I think, that's a really hard question. Because I have to think about that when I actually have to play them.
You mentioned yourself, you've been thinking a lot about the matches you're going to play.
Yeah. I feel like with Happy, since he's such a dominant player, he's usually trying to play the safest standard builds that have the highest win percentage. So if you're trying to metagame him or like outplay him in terms of build selection, it's a little easier if you're the underdog. If you're on an even playing field, you're more likely to like, gamble a little bit more on like builds. So it would almost be a little more unpredictable to face Xlord, but at the same time, I don't think his execution is as good. So yeah, in terms of the builds selection, it'd be a little harder, but in terms of actually playing the game, I think it'd be much easier to beat him. Okay,
so you can focus more on, you can take on Xlord in a face-to-face and then
I think
leave it to him to do like sneaky expansion or whatever.
Yeah, I think against Xlord, I would have to play safer builds. I usually default to Farseer Headhunters against him because I know he can play Crypt Lord and he will do it against Blade. And that's always a fear of mine because I do like to play Blade. So that's just like one of the examples on which I'll default back to Farseer Headhunters just because it's a safer play and I don't want to like auto lose in a best of 3 in like one game,
And a meta, if you had to pick a meta, would you say that Farseer Headhunters is your type of playstyle, or do
No, absolutely not. I hate. Okay, I've learned to play it, but I hate the whole strategy. I hate the playstyle. It feels so like reserved and hands off. You're just like creeping and your opponent tries to harass you, so you walk away, and then you kite them. It's just like it's such a cowardly way to play. Play Blade like a man.
I feel like a lot of like opponents, like humans, night elves, and on they despise headhunters and want them nerfed, but the one race that hate headhunters the most is by far Undead. Orc players.
I don't know why. I don't know why other races complain, because Orc finally has a strategy that the other races have been doing forever.
Yeah.
Like archers, mass range units, rifles, and fiends. Like, okay, now you're mad that Orc can do it too? Come on. That's so unfair.
But it's very fun to see all the Blade players being so annoyed with the meta changing.
I personally hate it, but I've learned to play Blade against Farseer Headhunters, and I think it's very playable. So I don't think you're tied down to that strategy at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you think, like, I remember when the two racks all in with the Farseer against Blade, that was quite dominating.
Yeah,
do you think that's been solved somewhat, or is that manageable?
It's for sure solved. All you have to do is go one bro tech and Panda second. But it's difficult if you don't know how to play it. Like, if you try to creep, if you try to do anything but like, completely counter that strat, the moment you sniff it out, you're probably gonna lose. And even if you do sniff it out but play suboptimally even a little bit, you can still lose. So it's just a hard strat to play against. It's amazing for like lower level players, because I really don't believe like any lower level player could beat it if someone else is doing it to them.
There's very little room for error when you play against
exactly.
them. Yeah. So does that also change the Orc mirror actually? When you queue as Blade and then you open the game, do you stray away from starting with a green camp, or do you have to run direct to him to make sure he's not?
Yeah, it's actually a very big consideration. It's one of the biggest issues in Orc mirror is trying to guess whether your opponent's going to go Farseer or Blade, because that can completely change your creep routes, whether you want to buy Dust or not. And there's usually playing against Farseer, you have to play very specifically. And so then if you're doing those builds, your opponent can pull out play Farseer a bunch of times and then pull out the Blade to counter your Blade route, because you're trying to beat Farseer. So there's a lot of mind games. And again, the important thing is to be able to play multiple builds all equally well. So the game's just getting harder and harder. Everyone has to master everything. Yeah,
and especially now that we see both Farseer and Blade Master, and we see Demon Hunter and Farseer, there are more options, and that just, even though maybe things are not harder to execute necessarily, when there are more a wide array of options.
Yeah, because when you know exactly what your opponent's doing, you can base all your builds and decisions around that. But then if they have two options, now you have to go like a middle of the road build, have scouting timings to be able to react. So like if your opponent's capable of like 20 different things, it starts to become really, really hard to find that perfect middle of the ground build that can scout and react to everything perfectly and still remain 50-50, even if, they do something that you're not expecting.
And now you mentioned scouting. Scouting and Orc, that hasn't historically gone well hand in hand. Do you think the one extra supply from the Great Hall to have the possibility of getting the peon out?
Yeah, that was completely game-changing and completely necessary, I think, because against Elf, just not playable without the peon scout. Yeah, and it's very useful against Undead as well, but great change. Huge props to whoever came up with that.
I agree. And well, finally, Hitman, before we round off, do you have anything you want to say to all the American fans and NA fans who are cheering for you?
NA's #1, baby. Always has been, always will be. We're on top, and I'll show that today.
That's a perfect way to end off the interview. Well,
thank you, RehcraM.